Happy Friday and welcome to the week that was Deadline Detroit's weekly news week in review show, which is otherwise known as 5 little windows on your laptop with talking heads in them. I'm Nancy Derringer. I'm a editor here and writer at Deadline Detroit, and today I'm joined, as usual, by my boss, our co-founder, Mr. Alan Lengel, speaking to you from his apartment over there in the Park Shelton. We also have some guests, mostly familiar faces if you watch us more often or once in a while. We've got Adolph Mongo, political consultant extraordinaire, coming to us from, where are you, Adolph? Wherever.
Oh,
yeah.
Phoenix.
Secret location.
Yeah,
Phoenix.
Are you in Phoenix still?
I'm in Phoenix, yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's much warmer
He's not
there.
coming back.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
I got to come back.
You belong to Detroit. We also have our semi-regular guest, lawyer Steve Fishman, down in the Ford building. And to join me against all these dudes, Portia Roberson, CEO of Focus Hope, who looks like she's probably at home too. So,
yep,
and then we're hoping, like any good holiday party, we're hoping to be joined in a few minutes by Bill Cycli, attorney who is having some technical issues, but we hope he'll be with us soon. And while I said happy Friday, I really should have probably said happy end of the week, because some of you consume this media, as we say now, at a different time than on Friday. But let's get into it. It's been a week. It's always been a week. Do we ever have slow news weeks anymore in Detroit? I don't think it happens. I mean, this is basically Miami with fewer disgusting bugs. But let's jump into probably what was the top story on the national scene, which was the revelations that came from the January 6th subcommittee. And that was the text messages that were read aloud by Liz Cheney from the Congress people on the floor and from Fox News hosts who were texting the president or Mark Meadows at the time of the insurgent or of the riot in the Capitol, saying Trump has to stop this. Trump has to stop this. These are his people. He needs to talk. And then turned around that night and lied through their teeth and said that it was Antifa. So who wants to start with this one? Let's let the condemnation rain down like justice.
Are we surprised?
Right.
No.
Are we surprised at these folks, these hypocrites? You know what? It's the same agenda that they play out with the common people. You don't need to get a shot. You don't need to wear a mask. And yet, most of them have 3 shots, the booster shot. They wear a mask and they watch other people die from this COVID-19. So yeah, they were scared out of their wits. Because those folks, if they would have caught anybody, I don't care if the Republican, Democrats, they was in a hanging mood. It was a lynch mob. They wasn't rioters. It was an old-fashioned lynch mob, and they wanted to lynch Pence and everybody else, Nancy Pelosi, and these folks are getting off with a slap on the back. They should be locked up for insurrection against the U.S. government.
Well, when you say, are you surprised? The answer is, for me, yes. I'm surprised that these people cared enough to reach out to Mark Meadows and reach out to the president and say, you have to do something. I'm surprised that Donald Jr. actually cared. Shows some distinction between him and his father. But, they're both.
Well, I was going to say, probably the only reason that some of those folks reached out is because they also were getting text messages from people who were in the building who were afraid. Because like Adolph said, I think a lot of those people realized that they weren't going to stop and figure out who was a Democrat or who was a Republican or who was a Trump supporter. They were coming for blood. And I'm sure that Sean Hannity and some of the rest of them got text messages from people who were inside the Capitol and said, I'm scared out of my wits. Please call the president and help him stop this because I'm scared of what's about to happen to me. And it was all self-preservation at that point. It wasn't about the larger picture. It wasn't about the government. It was about a bunch of old men who finally were confronted with people who they couldn't control, coming to do them violence and being just the same kind of scared you would be if you got in a street fight with somebody who you had been bullying for a long time and they finally stood up to you.
I think
Go ahead, Steve.
I think that the most interesting thing about all of this was that I don't believe that Hannity, Ingram, whoever else, the guy who's on in the morning, I don't think it ever crossed their mind that Meadows would turn over those text messages. And I think what drove them insane, because they're also so used to marching in lockstep with the former, with the career criminal. I think that they were shocked, and then they had no choice but to somehow try to make up some crap, which is exactly what they did, as Adolph said. That to me was the most amazing thing about it all. And I think that, I don't want to get ahead of myself at Schmuck of the Week because I'm not naming him Schmuck of the Week, but Meadows really has created not just a huge problem for himself, but a huge problem for the rest of them, because I don't think Liz Cheney is done reading texts. I think there's going to be a lot more interesting things that are going to come out. And that, to me, their reaction to being outed by Meadows, to me, was the whole story here.
I have a question for you, Steve. If the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. is looking at the case as a potential criminal case, could they indict the president for dereliction of duty or failing to fulfill the obligations or duties of the job or something? Or is there a federal statute on that?
I don't think there's anything in any statute anywhere that requires people to interfere to stop something. For instance, if Portia's about to shoot Adolph, and I see she's about to shoot Adolph, and I don't do shit because either I don't care if she shoots Adolph or I'm just not getting involved. You can't charge somebody, as far as I know, with something like that. Inciting the riot is a different situation, and we all know that people have been charged and can be charged.
Right.
But when you're looking at Trump, the Georgia case, to me, is so much simpler in terms of charging obstruction of justice, the phone call with his own voice. That's the kind of evidence that you want when you're going to have a public figure, whether it's Trump or whether it's some left-winger. You don't want to have to rely on inference or maybe some witness says X, Y, or Z. And there's nothing better, as Portia well knows from her days doing, until she got smart and started doing other things, as she well knows, there's nothing worse than the client's own voice, because the question to the witness is very simple. Play the thing. Sir, is that you? And right. That's why I think the Georgia case, I wouldn't, Alan, even attempt to prosecute him or really any of the other, the rabble rousers. In this case, it's too difficult. There's too many ways to sneak out of it without having to really concede a whole hell of a lot.
Right. Okay.
What I find kind of amazing about, well, I don't find it amazing. We've seen it so many times now through over the last several years, but this thing that, for lack of a better term, I just call, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? Which is these people. I mean, these, they're claiming that it wasn't an insurgency. These guys are roaming through the Capitol going, Nancy, hang Mike Pence, Nancy. And, but that wasn't an insurgency. That wasn't a coup. That was just a rowdy tourist visit, this sort of thing. And now they're saying the same thing. I mean, these are the text messages. Here they are. They're admitted into evidence. And, they're just like, hey, they doctored that somehow. And do people believe this? How stupid are these people who follow, Fox News and all those folks?
I would love it. There's probably a great SNL skit where they're just, because people were saying that they were just tourists, just taking a tour. You could see like a family of 5 just walking with all these crazy guys with Camp Auschwitz sweatshirts, and suddenly they pull out the bear spray and start breaking windows, and the family's like, oh my God, this tour is amazing.
That really is. Nancy, you said how dumb are these folks? These folks are so dumb that these are the same people.
How dumb are they? Right.
How dumb are they? They're the same people that's been saying, led by Rand Paul, we don't want to give money to hurricane victims, victims of disasters in other states. We don't want the federal government giving us anything. And yet, we saw what happened in Kentucky. a state that Biden only won 2 counties out of 120, and these people, and they still talking smack about Biden and all this other stuff. Even when they burying their dead, they still believe in the lie that Donald Trump threw out there, that the election was a fraud and that the Biden is somehow not the president. Unbelievable.
You're right, and I think at this point we have to say hello to our late arriving party guest here, Attorney Bill Cycli, who
You don't have to. You don't have
No,
to.
we want to though. So, how you doing, Bill? Nice to see
I'm
you.
well,
here.
thank you, Nancy. I'm sorry for my technical difficulties.
That's okay. We'll send the waitress around with some spiked eggnog
Bill,
for you in just a little bit.
We're going to make a progressive commercial on that.
So Bill, we were just kind of working our way through the January 6th subcommittee stuff. Is there anything in particular you want to say about that?
Yeah, no, I've been listening. I couldn't get my video to work, but I've been listening. And I agree with everything that everybody said. It is amazing to me that you can have an insurrection and people simply say, "Oh, it's not. And there's nothing wrong with what happened." And I personally think that these Fox people were sending the text messages because they were afraid of what the consequences would be down the road if it was any more successful than it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was eventually going to be shut down. And the question was, if people in Congress would have been killed, what would have happened to Donald Trump then?
Yeah.
And what would have happened to those supporters then? I think that's the only reason. I think these Fox people are despicable, and on one hand, they liked what they saw. On the other hand, they were afraid of what would happen to their base. There's nothing altruistic, in my opinion, about any of these messages.
You know,
they get no kudos.
Bad optics for the GOP.
Yeah, it's funny. Chris Wallace, who hosted their Sunday morning news chat show, turned in his resignation at the end of his show last week, and he said he was moving on to this new CNN thing. And I don't have cable anymore, so I don't watch Fox News. I don't watch any cable news anymore. But somebody who I know who does said, that was the last guy left at Fox who had anything that even approached, journalistic, bona fides. I mean, he just he's the only one who's not pure propaganda. And so that's kind of the, unless they hire somebody else, I mean, that's what happens now.
He was the last host. I mean, they have some legitimate reporters, but he's certainly the last host that really, when you had somebody go on his show, he asked questions regardless if they were Republicans or Democrats. And it was really, they were lucky to have a guy like that hang in there for so long, because he was the only person, when you talk about fair and balanced, he was the only person who came close to that at the station.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. So, all right. Well, since Adolph brought up the tornadoes, now they don't want to take any, and the Kentucky people didn't want to give any money for Hurricane Sandy, but now they've got their hands out. That's probably a good pivot to another topic that I wanted to get into today, which was this weather that we've been having, and it's absolutely freakish. I mean, we had last weekend were these insane winds and tornadoes in Kentucky, and that was followed just a couple days ago by, I mean, you can't even really call them gale force winds. I mean, they're hurricane force winds that were coming across the Great Plains and the Rocky Mountains. They had 90-mile-an-hour winds in Kentucky. I mean, in Colorado. It was driven by it was a far more severe version of what we had in the last couple of days, which was this incredibly warm, unseasonable temperature, followed by these very heavy winds. So, what we have now is this our new normal? Is this our new normal or what? I mean, you guys have all been around long enough to see freakish weather in the past before we start looking into climate change. But, is this what climate change is?
Nancy, we
I
don't have
asked you. Go ahead.
Nancy, we don't have to worry about that. The Republicans have been assuring us for years. There's
Climate
no
change is
such
not-
thing as climate change. This is no different than when I was at Bagley Elementary and we had a warm day in December. It's exactly the same. So personally, I figure, why would they lie, those Republicans? They don't lie much. They usually are telling the truth. So I don't worry about it if it's 63 degrees yesterday and 30 today, and the wind is blowing my Corvette all over the damn John Lodge Expressway. No, I'm not worried. There's the Republicans are assuring us.
Yeah.
And you know they'll come to help when things go bad. If things should happen to go bad, you know,
Well,
they'll be the first to rush in with help.
We did have the very satisfying spectacle of Rand Paul, who was captured. I mean, I think I saw in a loop the speeches that he made during the Hurricane Sandy disaster declaration saying, everybody wants to be generous when it's not their money. Well, blah, blah, blah. You know, and now he's the one who's got his hand out because, you know, that's not a sustainable position when you are the actual senator of a state that's just been destroyed. There were so many aspects to this story that I found fascinating. Among them, the Amazon workers who were working all night, you know, probably a 3-shift season at Amazon now with Christmas and the holidays coming, and they were not allowed to leave. You know, I saw a couple of people say this is Amazon's Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, but I haven't seen any reaction outside of, you know, say woke Twitter on that one. Anyone?
Unbelievable that there's a tornado about to take off the roof of the building and they tell you can't leave. I would have left. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I would have left. And those folks know they live in a tornado zone. And these tornadoes, I think they're worse than hurricanes because they can just come hit you across the street, miss you right there, and just leave a wave of destruction that is. You don't see that too much when a hurricane hits you. You have time. They let you know it's coming in 2 days or 3 days. Tornadoes just come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So I would have left. Those folks, what, $15 an hour, 14, 12? What? It wasn't worth staying there.
Well,
I'm sure they were screaming.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they were screaming. Do not leave. We promised Mr. Langle 2-day delivery. He's going to
Prime delivery. He needs it right now.
Yes. You cannot leave.
Well, you know,
and I'm like, where's my box of chocolates? Damn it! They said 2 days.
I happen to believe that Alf's right, and you know, tornadoes are incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
I was out in Kansas one time and saw a group of them coming down through a cornfield. They're terrifying. The problem, in my opinion, isn't that they wouldn't let them leave. They wouldn't let them quit working in some situations. Right. Because leaving might not have been the smartest idea.
Oh, because of the
you don't know what you're going out into.
Dude, right.
But they certainly should not have continued working. But I do think that there's a larger issue here, and that is that all of our refusal to deal with climate change and to deal with these naysayers is coming home to roost. Mm-hmm. Listen, I vividly remember being at Wayne State University in 1970. I skipped school. I was a senior in high school. I skipped school to go down to the first Earth Day teach-in. And I remember what they were talking about in 1970. And you know what? We're using the same words to describe the same problem, but we're having these horrific changes. And we're saying, don't believe the man behind the curtain. It's not really happening. This is no different than people saying, oh, this wasn't an insurrection in December. Mm-hmm. It's no different than all of these denials about reality. Yeah. And my bigger concern is we no longer agree on the same reality as a country.
Yeah.
How are we ever going to succeed if that's true?
Well, yeah, it's the old you're entitled to your own opinion, but not your own facts deal.
Can I jump in here too, Nancy? The thing that I think is so incredible about, you know, Amazon and the candle factory and the insistence that people keep working is here we are trying to talk about the workforce and returning to the workforce and all these narratives about how people don't want to work, right? They're just lazy. They don't want to go to work. They want to just collect checks from COVID and blah, 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 blah. And then it's like you have a moment like this where people watch other people die because they were forced to stay at work. And you expect, you know, somebody like me who does workforce development in my job to go out and recruit people to go to work for these companies. And they're thinking like, I won't use the word, but you know, the expletive you, because, you know, I'm not going to work at a place that wouldn't let me leave in the midst of a tornado for 15 or 14 or even $20 an hour because they were so, you know, committed to getting Allen's chocolates there on time that I ended up dying trying to go to work there. So, you know, it's also part of this whole narrative about how people didn't want to work during COVID, how people don't want to go to work now that the economy is supposed to be coming back or we're trying to get the economy back. But the truth of the matter is, as long as you have places that insist on these kind of workplace rules, you're not going to be able to recruit, particularly younger people who are like, yeah, I don't need it that bad. Like, I you know, I don't need it that bad.
That's a really good point. And, you know, you were talking, Bill, about how they had to keep working during this thing. And, you know, you wonder, and what Adolph said about them being in kind of a tornado zone or a tornado alley, if you will. Did they have a safety procedure? Did they have like a, you know, a central area that was reinforced where people could gather, you know, while they were having, you know, tornado warnings outside? All those things are really important. And I remember a while back, you know, 20 some years ago, when I was working in Fort Wayne, Indiana, a very, very super rare F5, which is the strongest tornado of, you know, on the scale, hit Van Wert, Ohio, which was just across the Ohio line from us. And I remember there was a story about this kid who was like an assistant manager of the movie theater, who was like 19 years old, who had the presence of mind to tell people, let's all, you know, it's dangerous outside. Let's all gather in I think it was the bathroom. And he crammed about 50 people into the men's and ladies' rooms, and they were all in, you know, brace position. The tornado scored a direct hit on this theater, completely destroyed it, except for that little area. Only one person was injured, and it was the kid, the manager, and he got like a cut on his arm, and that was it. And the photographs afterward, I remember there was a picture of a car that had been dropped into the middle of the seats of this movie theater. And, you know, it's like, it doesn't take much to set these, you know, these safety zones up and let your people know that you are valued enough that we want you to live through these things.
You to live through it.
Well, do them.
You know,
exactly.
It's interesting, just to go back a little bit to the climate change issues. I mean, how, and I blame it on the Republicans, how they've been able to politicize. I mean, even when the EPA was formed, it became like, because big business did not want to have to do things to mitigate pollution, it became a political issue. We're seeing climate change now that it's a libtard. It's ridiculous. It's like when we see, you know, the EPA, when we see like chicken farms in North Carolina, they're dumping pollution into the waters, and people are getting cancer and stuff like that. That's not a Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal. And now we've got COVID being politicized with the shots and the masks. I mean, where Trump would not wear a mask, and he politicized that and said, hey, we're all about freedom here. And he had these rallies down in, Oklahoma, where people died afterwards. It's just crazy.
Herman Cain,
right? Yeah, Herman Cain, right.
Well, you've given me a good segue then to one of our next topics, which is COVID, which I'm calling our shape-shifting nemesis, because once again, we have a new variant that is just starting to pop up in Michigan. And from what I was listening to on the radio today, it's going to probably be the dominant strain of COVID in the coming months. So welcome, Omicron. Delta was great to know you, but now half the people I know now are sick with COVID. And
Delta is so yesterday.
Delta, yeah, Omicron is the thing.
Go ahead. And here in Arizona, the governor just made sure that he issued another mandate saying you don't have to wear a mask, you don't have to be social distancing. And then, as he was making his statement, the hospitals in the Phoenix area are overflowing with folks that refuse to get the shot. They're dying 20, 30 a day, and they got thousands of people getting it. And they still got folks, even when they on a respirator, saying, "Oh, it's just the flu. It's not COVID." They in denial. These folks are out of their mind.
We forget.
They can't comment when they're on the ventilator because they're on their way out. They can't talk. Go ahead.
We forget that on June, I think it was June 25th, we had 40 cases. This was before the Delta variant. And now we are having 8,000 a day. There were 40 a day back then, 100 a day. It's blown up again. And now we see with the latest variant, well, we're going to go crazy again. I mean, they're thinking by January, it's just going to go wild. The only thing is, I guess I was listening last night on MSNBC to one of the experts who was saying it's possible there'll be a big burst and then it'll start falling quickly, but they're not sure.
Well, and the question is, do you survive the big burst? I mean,
right.
like how many people survive? I think I saw the number was 1 in 100 people over the age of 65 have died in the last 2 years from the coronavirus. I mean, those are numbers that no one, I mean, I always go back to March of 2020 and think like, I originally thought we would be out of office for 3 weeks. And then, it just has gotten progressively worse. And now to look back at some of the numbers and really numbers that, this is the thing about tragedy and pandemics. And even when you talk about school shootings, it's like we so quickly get desensitized to the numbers. Like when you stop to think about what those numbers look like, how many people have died from COVID, it's mind boggling to me that, the rest of us, those vaccinated, even those aren't, we just so quickly, and maybe it's because we have so much news all the time and there's so much information coming in, but we just get so desensitized to numbers that if you asked me 2 years ago how, almost 1 million people were going to die of a disease, I'd be like, that's crazy. The world will stop. Like we will stop. We will do something to eradicate anything that would kill 1 million American citizens in a 2-year span. And now we're here at 2 years and it's just about those numbers. And we're like, I still won't wear a mask in a Target.
Sucks to
but
be
they're
old,
not. But they're not numbers. They're not numbers. They're people.
They're right.
There's people that you
I
knew.
know.
There's people that you had drinks with. There's people that you joke with. There's people that you saw occasionally. There's people you saw at parties or receptions or whatever. These are folks, well-known people that wasn't well-known, and it's still happening every day. If you look at the obituaries in the newspapers and you see somebody that I didn't know they were gone, or yeah. So it's not the number thing; it's a people thing.
I agree, and Portia, to your point, which I think is spot on, to connect it with what Alan said earlier. This is the consequence of politicizing these issues.
Everything, right?
It is the consequence of making these issues political, so we cannot believe them. Don't believe the man behind the curtain. He's not there. And we could have been out for a couple of months. We could have gotten on top of this. Why didn't we? Who would have ever imagined? We're at 800,000 now. I just read a little over 800,000 deaths. We'll be at 1 million soon. And why is that? I mean, we'll come up with treatments. The fact of the matter is what we're really going to do is kill off much of the third world,
right?
Because we don't really care about them. We're going to kill off much of the third world because we're not sharing vaccines. But what is it about our country that would allow 1 million people to die? And the answer is we politicize it. And then we say it didn't really happen.
Well, we didn't politicize
We do the same thing about the environment and on and on. And until we come to a point where we can at least see the same reality, this is what's going to happen to us.
Winston Churchill had a great quote. He said, "You can always count on Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else."
That's pretty much how it's shaping up.
There's a guy in Southeast Michigan, I think he lives somewhere out in Oakland County. His name is Charles Gaba, and he's made a name for himself in recent years. He's a data nerd, and he's been doing some really interesting data projections and visualizations around COVID. He started as tracking Affordable Care Act signups. In fact, I think his website is something like acasignups.net or something. But he's in the last couple of months, he started looking at county level COVID data and overlaying it with their voting patterns. And it is astonishing. The more likely your county is to have voted for Donald Trump, the less likely it is to be very well vaccinated. And the death rates are really starting to climb. So this is not only political, it's stupid political, because what the Republicans are essentially doing is killing off their own voters at a time when every vote counts. And I'm just flummoxed by this.
It's funny. Down in Florida, Ron DeSantis, there's so many people saying, oh my God, Florida's amazing. Look at us. Our numbers are low. Well, their numbers were at 25,000 a day, 20,000 a day. They have the third highest death rate from COVID in the country. And people are going, oh, Ron DeSantis, it's great. Well, now, the weather is a little cooler. People are spending more time outdoors as opposed to inside the air conditioning, but they're going to swing back again because they're basically doing nothing. Actually, the governor here, I'm disappointed that she can't at least put a mask mandate for indoor, going to a grocery store and stuff like that. She's afraid. It's such a, she's following the Republican playbook at this point because she does not. But the problem is, look, the Republicans who hate her are going to continue to hate her. They're not going to be suddenly like, she's not so bad. They still hate her. And the base that she has, who liked her for being bold and really going out there, they're going to be disappointed and may not show up to the polls.
Well, I think that the governor is reading tea leaves now. She got folks saying, do this or don't do this. Right. She need to get back into that big mode again and say, you know what, you got to wear a mask. Start with the state workers and, make them take you to court if that's what they're going to have to do. But you just can't sit back and not say anything. Right. And when you got, look at the NBA, look at the NFL, look at all these sports venues. You got 50,000 people watching a game, and the players, 20, 30 of them got COVID. What is that saying about the folks that's sitting up there without a mask on and enjoying the game?
Yeah. And they got the Red Wings.
This is going to get worse.
Bertuzzi, the Red Wing, he's the only one, I think, in the whole NHL who is not taking the shot. He can't go to Canada to play, and I don't think you can play in New York City.
Somebody need to kick his ass right now.
and when he does not play, their record is horrible. And when he does play, it's a lot better.
He's taken it in the wallet, though. So if he continues to stick by this stupid decision that he has made, when it's costing him, I don't know what a hockey player of his caliber makes. It's going to cost him a lot of money by the end of the season. If he's that dumb, then that's the way it goes. Steve, you had your hand up for a minute.
There's more. Well, now that you're talking about Bertuzzi, there's a lot more to it than how much money it's going to cost him. I mean, those of us who had the opportunity to play at a decent level, your teammates is what matters. I agree with Adolf. I mean, these guys are going out there working their butt off. They're 12-6-3 when he plays, and they're 2-6 when he doesn't play. He's their best player. And forget about what he likes about or doesn't like about vaccines. What he's telling his own teammates basically is to go screw themselves. That's the first thing. The reason I put my hand up, I mean, all this discussion is interesting, but what I'm really interested in, I've been asking all my friends and associates, what do you guys, here we have 6 of us, what, if anything, do you guys intend to do different in your own personal life now that this Omicron's around and all this noise about this, that, and the other? What do you guys intend to do differently, if anything?
I am probably going to go into winter 2020 mode very soon, which is, staying indoors and not going out as much and, doing the outdoor tenting stuff and everything else. I'm waiting. I read about Omicron almost every day, and I'm encouraged that based on what is admittedly still a very small sample, it doesn't seem to be as severe as Delta. But I've got 3 vaccines now, and I'm willing to get 25 more if that's what it takes to keep me safe. I do not want to get this disease.
What about
Okay,
everybody else?
I'm the
was saying,
same. Yeah, I've been wearing a mask anyways. Although I saw you and we had lunch and I didn't have my mask on, and then I thought about it afterwards. And then part of my problem has been I've taken it off and then I go into panic mode for 2 days afterwards because I'm like, what the hell was I thinking by not wearing my mask? So I think what Nancy said, I think, I'll probably refrain from the dinners out. I'm on a text chain right now. We're talking about whether we should cancel a Christmas Eve brunch because it's in a restaurant and we'll be exposed. And is that the problem? But I've always kept my mask on. And I have so many at this point that I'm going to keep them on. Probably, I thought it would just be to the end of 2021. It looks like I'm looking at 22 is like, maybe I'll be wearing a mask until the end of that. But I will say this, the benefit of having worn a mask is I haven't gotten anything else either. So I can do without getting the flu and other people's cooties. So mask wearing for me is not a big deal. So,
I'm becoming a Japanese person on this topic.
I'm joining the call Fauci. That's all. We already got one disciple here, Alan. I call him Alan Fauci. Because, he makes sure you can't get on the elevator without a mask. You can't come to his party without being vaccinated. So, yeah, you got to stay away from these folks,
The problem with that, the problem is you don't know who those folks are.
Right.
I mean, that's the problem. I'm not making a lot of changes, I'm not making a lot of changes because I've never stopped wearing my mask.
Right.
I go into a grocery store, I go any place, I'm wearing my mask. I've been vaccinated 3 times, and now we just started going to restaurants a few months ago or a few weeks ago.
I'm astounded.
And we're going to stop going to restaurants.
Yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah. We're going to stop going to restaurants.
I am completely.
I've got a fairly significant bar. Steve, you can come over to my house. My bar at the house is really good. No,
the reason I'm asking is because I ask all of my friends. Once I got vaccinated, once we had the first 2, as soon as I was vaccinated, my decision was, okay, I'm vaccinated. I'm going and doing what I feel like doing. I'm going to restaurants and whatever it is. Once we got the booster, that made it even more so. To sit and read, Nancy, you say you read about Omicron every day. I don't give a flying shit what they say about it. I'm listening to it. To me, look, who are we kidding? This is never going to change. This is the way we're going to live the rest of our lives, okay? So you got to decide. Masking, of course, if I go in the grocery store, but it's not because of me. I just don't want to transmit it to someone else. But in terms of going places, we've been to Andiamo's and Warren to a Bee Gees tribute group. We're all dancing and nobody had a goddamn mask on. And that was a month ago. And, we went to the lunch that Portia's talking about. Who had on a mask? Not a one person, right?
Yeah.
Portia,
but you're right. The bulk of people did not have one on.
But my point is, none of us are guaranteed anything, okay?
That's true.
And I go through this with friends of mine. They say, well, they're going to do something. I said, well, when are you going to change? Well, like Nancy said, well, maybe next year. Well, maybe 2020. Well, I'll be dead by then. I don't really give a shit.
Well, I hopefully will not be.
The problem is almost everybody, though I'm going to be careful because I don't know everybody's ages on here. But Steve, you and I are old enough. The fact of the matter is, if we get it, it's a serious risk.
Yeah, horseshit. Horseshit.
Steve is too tough.
Steve, hold on. But they are developing treatments that will minimize this risk. Pfizer's got a new pill out that reduces the risk of dying by 86%, I think it is. But the fact of the matter is, I'd prefer not to die that way. I've had 3 close friends die of COVID. I understand it's not a very pleasant way to go. I don't want to give it to my wife, and I don't want to give it to anybody else. So I'm going to be careful. We've got a big decision. We've got a regular trip to Mexico that, it's a fairly isolated resort. We think we can be safe there. But the truth is that I don't want to get stuck in Mexico with COVID. I don't want to test positive and not be able to come home.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of things in your daily life that I think
you can't stop traveling. I've been traveling. You take precautions. You wear a mask, but I'm not gonna lock myself up and
But are you going
like
out of the
we
country?
did for 2 years. We were in. Everybody was locked inside. Couldn't go shopping. Couldn't go and do anything. And if you were married, you had to look at your spouse every day, all day.
Amen.
If you
Amen to
wasn't, or if you by
Alan knows
yourself,
my wife. It's a pleasure to look at my spouse.
I say my feeling is Fauci is my shepherd I shall not want. but I do feel that when the numbers go down a little bit, I feel like back in June, I was out. I went to Adolf's brother has a bar. He had a little pre-opening. Nobody wore a mask. People were hugging. And this was sort of pre-Delta. I feel like when the numbers start going crazy, the odds of you getting it are higher. It's like I was in the bagel factory in Ferndale on Wednesday. There were 9 people in there in line. 2 of us were wearing masks, and I'm like, it's not that much to ask people at least wear a mask.
Well, you know what's going to happen, you guys? You guys are going to do everything right just like that, and then you're going to be walking across the street and you're going to get hit by a bus.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what?
On that positive note,
Steve's right about this.
If you think there's a guarantee in this life,
to restaurants. I quit going to restaurants. I tried to be good, so I started exercising more. I got on my bicycle, had an accident, broke my hip, and was in the hospital for 2 weeks.
Oh no!
And in a wheelchair for 6 more.
Oh my God!
There are all kinds of risks, but not. I don't think you take needless. Adolf, I wanted to ask you. You say you're traveling, which I think is a good thing, but are you traveling out of the country?
No.
Yeah,
I traveled out of the country.
Traveling out of the country. Well, if you call Arizona in the country, yeah. I'm traveling out of the country.
Whether they should be part of the country, but that's a different thing.
I traveled out of the country, but I went to Europe where they have a much higher vaccination rate. Everybody wears a mask, et cetera, and I was fine. So
and you justified that in your own mind because you wanted to go. Don't give me that shit.
Okay, I did. I did want to go.
You made up some crap. That's exactly what everybody does. This guy says he's going to go exercise. I'm in the gym every morning. Do I think that's going to keep me from getting sick? Of course not. But I mean, all you did, Nancy, was make up a justification. That was total bullshit what you just said.
It totally keeps you sexy.
Steve, tell us how you really feel, will you?
No, I mean, seriously, let's tell the truth.
All right.
Either we're scared or we're not. But when you're making up justifications, I mean, that's bullshit.
Before we sound like a bunch of people sitting around the nursing home talking about all of our complaints, let's get back into the lively news. Since we have 2 lawyers on the panel today, I did want to talk about the 3. I'm sorry. Portia, okay. I'm sorry. No
smart lawyer in the panel.
Okay, so they're all okay. I wanted to talk about this case in Livingston County, and we wrote about it. I think Michigan Advance picked it up, and essentially, this is what happened. There's a local woman there, kind of a lefty. And she mean tweeted a thread about another woman in Livingston County who's a registered nurse, and she's one of these people who goes around and speaks loudly against masks and against COVID precautions. She was not nice to her, but she did not libel her. It was all a matter of stating facts, posting clips of her talking about how kids shouldn't wear masks at school and blah, 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 blah. And I think she referred to her as Nurse E. coli because this was part of this woman's argument was that they got E. coli on their masks and then it would get in their lungs somehow. Anyway, she does this. And some days later, she is called on by the local sheriff, Sheriff Murphy in Livingston County, who says that there's been complaints about her. He believes she's in violation of some state law regarding harassment, and he is referring her case to the county prosecutor. Basically, this is like, and I believe this sheriff is one of these constitutional sheriffs who believes that he is the only law that anybody needs to respect. And this is what he's decided to do. I mean, this to me is rather alarming as a person who often speaks her mind on Twitter. Anybody else read up on this and have something
So
to say
first of
about
all, this is why I have to still wear a mask, because my whole facial expression while you were talking about it just gave off everything I'm thinking about the crazy people in Livingston County. I mean, first, the sheriff has nothing else to do but go visit the woman who was harassing somebody on Twitter or Facebook or wherever else. Where was she producing this harassment? I mean, where was
Twitter.
she?
Twitter. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in real trouble with you, Nancy. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say a word because I mean, me and my Twitter account is, I have to put on constantly. These are all only my thoughts and they do not represent the thoughts of anyone else.
Like I said, she referred to her as Nurse E. coli, and I believe she used the poop emoji for that. So,
it was, and he went to her house and now has referred it to the county prosecutor.
Yes.
If the county prosecutor charges that woman with anything, I mean, who is the county prosecutor in Livingston? Steve, do you know, Mr. Fishman?
I have no idea.
I don't either.
I don't either.
But I don't care who it is. I think that the odds of the prosecutor taking up this charge minimum.
Slim to none. Yeah,
I hope
so. None. But I would point out that this sheriff is also the same guy who refused to enforce legal mask mandates.
Oh, is that one? Yeah.
So I think that, I'm not sure you guys are journalists. How do you spell hypocrisy?
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that this guy probably doesn't have a clue as to what the First Amendment says.
Mm-hmm. Well, and this is kind of interesting because this is, I'm not sure if this guy is a member of the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association of America, like Dar Leaf is in Berry County. But, a lot of these guys, they kind of get big heads, and they, I just can't imagine living in a place like Berry County and trusting my safety to a sheriff who believes that the people who are plotting to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer just wanted to do a citizen's arrest.
I think Nancy, you were confusing the parts of the body. These kind of guys, these kinds of sheriffs, it's not their big heads that they're going. It's a little bit lower and to the left. You know what I mean? You can't really, at least in my opinion, people who behave like that. And it's interesting you brought this up because when we get the Schmuck of the Week, you'll see the connection. But people who behave like that, it's not their heads that they're concerned about. They really do want to show the whole world that they rule and whatever they say goes. And is that a threat? You're goddamn right. It's a threat. It's a threat to democracy as we know it. I agree with Bill and Portia 100%. I don't believe there's a prosecutor on the planet that would pull a stunt like that, but that doesn't mean it can't happen.
Right.
I'm not sure what you would charge the lady, but I read a little bit about it. It just sounded like she was making fun of the woman. And in a sense, I mean, certainly at least 50% of us would agree with her sentiments. This is a nurse that's running around, talking about what she was talking about. So, I think we'll really be in trouble when we start seeing things like that get referred to prosecutors' offices and prosecutors recommend charges. That's when you got problems.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay. I think this is probably a decent pivot then since we're talking about legal business, to talking about Oxford again this week. The Oxford, the bombshells have settled down a little bit now that everybody who needs to be is behind bars, and at least one Jeffrey Feiger lawsuit has been filed. I thought the interesting thing that came out this week is the initial response of the school district's lawyer, which is that he believes that the district employees who were sued have qualified immunity.
Well, they do have this is an area that I spend a lot of time practicing.
Okay.
I do a lot of these cases. They do have qualified immunity. It doesn't mean it applies here. Qualified immunity protects you when you are reasonably exercising your duties.
Okay.
Chauvin had qualified immunity.
Right.
Yeah.
It didn't give him the right to kill this guy. I mean, I've litigated against this firm. This is an absurd position. Of course, they have qualified immunity. It does not justify the brazen ignoring of these kids' rights to be safe. They knew that there was a danger. They knew that these kids in this building were in danger, or had a reasonable likelihood of being in danger, and they did nothing. I'm sorry. Qualified immunity disappears. I'd take these cases any day of the week. Anybody wants to refer me one of those cases, I'd be happy to litigate these cases. That is an absurd position. Of course they have qualified immunity. It doesn't mean it applies here.
If you were defending,
well, wait a minute.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Bill, you can't say whether it applies there because you don't know what the facts are, and you certainly aren't going to take Feiger's word for what the facts are unless you believe Santa Claus.
I don't take Feiger's.
No, I hear what you're saying.
What I know is this: you would never get subject to 2.114. Well, it's not 2.114 anymore. You would never be subject to sanctions for filing a bad faith claim just based on what we know about this case.
I agree.
We know that there were these notes. We know that they met with the parents. We know that the parents said, we're not taking them home, and that they sent this kid back to class. Sorry, there's enough there to file this claim in good faith. And the qualified immunity, the first level of qualified immunity is whether you can plead around it. There was plenty to plead around here. And based on what I know, I'd argue all day and all night that the facts are sufficient to get you to a jury on this case.
And we all know if that young man was a black kid and his parents say we not taking him home, they would have called the police.
Yeah.
Well, there's no question. They would have had the police there. The Oxford police would have been there in 5 minutes.
Actually, had this not been a suburban school, that would have happened. Even if he was white.
And let me just say that the suggestions this week of the things they're going to do as they begin to reopen Oxford schools or the high school still didn't include metal detectors, which is fascinating to me because we've had metal detectors in urban high schools since God knows when. And yet, because it doesn't look right in white schools, in more, I guess, considered to be more middle class communities, they still refrain from this. This kid walked in with a backpack filled with a gun and nobody could stop him because nobody knew it was in there because they don't do any kind of pat downs. They don't have any kind of metal detectors. And even after this tragedy, they're still not suggesting that because people still don't like the look of it. And, I mean, we can talk all day about, the prosecutor out there who I think is doing a great job under horrible circumstances. But the fact of the matter is she's talking about the state gun laws aren't severe enough, and they aren't. But I'm going to be very candid with you all. I gave up after Sandy Hook. I gave up because I was like, if they kill white babies in a place like Connecticut and nobody did anything about gun laws then, we damn sure aren't going to do it for 4 teenagers in Oxford, Michigan.
Amen.
We're just not.
Amen.
It's just not going to happen. So
I hate
I'm
to
not
circle back. It's what happens when we make things like this political.
Right.
This is suddenly about gun laws. I know a lot of people who own guns. None of them seem to think it's okay to do this.
No, and I don't think that they do. And I
think
think there's a lot of ways in which people can be responsible gun owners. But if we were going to we're going to jump in and dig into this issue of the proliferation of guns in all communities, because it's not just in Detroit. This was, these parents were out buying guns for their 14 or 15-year-old for Christmas gifts or whatever. If we really want to dig into this, we could, but we're not going to, because as you said, Bill, it's a political issue. It's not a person issue. And, people continue to put their heads in the sand about whether it's going to happen in their communities. I read something from a woman the other day whose child was there, was not one of the injured or killed, but she said, we always thought that it was happening in another community. We would go, oh, it can't happen here. And it continuously happens. But again, I hate to say it, but I thought Sandy Hook would be the moment where people said these were babies and they were, young kids. I mean, the thing that's supposed to be so precious to us as people, right? And we didn't do shit. And so now we're going to do something. I'm sorry. I don't think we're going to. I think we're going to thoughts and prayers it away until it goes away. There'll be some prosecutions, some people go to prison, and we'll think that handled it.
Which is why I agree with you 5,000%. I think we all agree. This country's never going to do anything about guns because for the same reason the guys think it's a big head, the head and the gun, and the next thing you know, they're thinking about their lower extremity. But you got to give Karen McDonald a ton of credit for charging the parents, because if you're not going to do
absolutely.
anything about guns, then you need to start charging parents, because maybe they'll wake up from their comas and at least lock the goddamn guns up when they leave the house or something like that. That's the only option that's left, is to start charging the parents of these juveniles who are doing these kinds of things. Because as you say, if Sandy Hook didn't do it, boy, you couldn't have said it better. A bunch of young little white babies and they don't do nothing. This country's never going to do anything about guns.
No, I
mean,
absolutely.
unfortunately, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Bill.
Unfortunately, it's not limited to just guns. I've said this 1,000 times. We know how to protect kids. Most of my practice over the last 15 years has been about suing institutions for failing to protect kids. And we know how to do it. We just won't do it.
Yeah.
We give lip service to protecting children. We just won't do it.
You had it in the Charles Pugh case, didn't you? You sued the school. Who did you?
We sued the school district, qualified immunity. We sued the principal and the assistant principal.
And you won.
And well, they settled on the first or second day of trial, but the school district did. But they didn't. Dave Lawson, Judge Lawson, incredibly bright federal judge who would have thrown me out of court if I wouldn't have been right on the law, said, no, they've got qualified immunity, but these facts overcome qualified immunity. The fact that they left him unsupervised in this setting with the knowledge that they had and against the policies of the school district justified us getting to the jury. And ultimately the school district decided to bail and pay.
So Steve, I had one question, which is, do we think, is charging going to be enough, or is she going to have trouble finding a jury that will convict them? Because I think people see themselves in the defendant, and are there going to be parents who sit on that jury? No, I think that people will sit on that jury and say, well, shit, I got my kid a gun, or my gun's not locked up at home. Like, you think that they won't, but I'm telling you, I think that there are some jurors that might see themselves and be like, well, it's not, that kid was 15 years old. He knew better. He shouldn't have done that. The mother sent a text saying, don't do it.
Unless they fire the attorney they have and hire Fishman.
I can see it.
I think that they're good. I think
they're gonna walk. They're gonna walk.
Oh, I
Really?
don't think so.
I hope this isn't like the Ohio State prediction.
You want my opinion? You wanted my opinion, right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Number one, Bill, there's no way they can hire Fishman, because Fishman would never take a case. That's number one. Number two, I think there's a couple things that you got to think about. See, the problem with people getting all their information from the press, whether it's television, whether it's Karen being interviewed by the New York Times or whatever, you wind up with a certain opinion as to what actually happened. Bill, I understand exactly what he's saying about qualified immunity, but he has an opinion of what the facts are. I personally believe, from things that I know, that his opinion is wrong, not because he's dumb or something. He just hasn't heard all the facts, okay? So what I think is going to happen in that case, I'm not going to say that Adolph's wrong, because if you get a certain group of jurors, they may say, well, how can you hold the parents responsible? What's going to matter is the facts that come out, and the facts that are going to come out, the only facts that can come out about the behavior of the parents. Forget what you read in the newspaper. Forget what you see on the TV. The only way it's going to come out will be when they have the testimony of the people who are in the room with them, okay? And depending on how that comes out, that's going to influence whether or not they're convicted. Because you got to remember, the normal person, let's say a ton of people out there, this is totally different than the way I live. A ton of people in Lake Orion and Oxford and all those places, they got guns. They give their kids guns. They take them skeet shooting. They take them hunting. Something that's so foreign to me, I can't even imagine it. But that's how a lot of people live. On the other side of it, though, to argue against Adolph saying that they're going to be acquitted, on the other side of it, a lot of those folk, I'm sure, number one, are careful with their weapons. And when they take their kids somewhere, they make sure blah, blah, blah. And they do lock up the weapons. And they may sit there and look. It could be the opposite of what Adolph is worrying about, which is they're going to empathize with these people. They may very well go the exact opposite way. Yeah. And they may look and say, God damn, what the hell's wrong with these folks? Yeah. I'm a gun person. I'd never do that. So you really don't know until more of the facts come out, which is why it's premature for people to be discussing all this crap. And then you have to see what kind of jury you wind up with. Because I'm telling you, having tried a zillion cases, as you guys know, if you get jurors that look at the defendant as an outlier from how they would behave, an outlier from what they think is a reasonable way to believe, then involuntary manslaughter fits perfect. because they don't have to intend to kill. They're not charged with murder. They're just charged with grossly and negligently allowing this to happen. A lot of people who may be gun owners and whatever, they may look at them and say, "Oh, not these people."
Steve, if we didn't talk about this stuff, we wouldn't have much of a show, which is probably a good place to go to now that we're kind of winding down, to go to the big feature that we're all waiting for.
And now it's time for Deadline Detroit's nominees for Schmuck of the Week.
Okay, it's time for the traditional show ender, the Schmuck of the Week. We all have been told to read up and come with somebody. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, Adolf.
The fan base of Florida State University and the media. 60 years ago, the Southeastern Conference did not want one black player to play on any sports team. Florida State was one of those schools. And now they're dying, they're crying because Deion Sanders took their number one recruit and had the nerve to assign him to lonely little Jackson State, a historical black college in Mississippi. They're going crazy. Listen,
they actually said he was stolen from Florida State, which has been pointed out that you can't steal black people.
They
that time has ended.
Slavery.
We cannot be stolen because we are not property. In case somebody needs to recognize that, they keep writing about how he stole him from Florida State.
But I think it's ironic that these people are going crazy. They're burning Deion Sanders jerseys, and that's unbelievable.
I love to see
Deion Sanders is a coach now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. You can tell how out of it I am. But
Nancy.
Okay. Well, there's a friend of mine has booked him for a prayer breakfast in Fort Wayne, and he apparently just brought the house down with all these like stick up the butt Lutheran ladies and gentlemen there. So it was quite something. So the entire fan base of Florida State
Okay, because their grandfathers and grandmothers are the reasons why we have these black schools. Yeah. Because they did not want a black person on campus. The only thing a black person could do at that time was clean their shit.
All right, who's next? Engel?
All right, mine is Urban Meyer, the former Ohio State coach. Speaking of coaches,
okay.
Yes, who was just fired by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Their record was 2-11. He was just a flaming asshole. The players are celebrating. There's a little story that just came out about their kicker in the preseason, one of their final preseason games, where the guy was doing some stretches and he had missed a couple field goals during a game, and Urban Meyer came up to him and really gave him a swift kick in the leg, not just a little like nudge, but really a hard kick, and said, "Stop missing those kicks." And he said to Urban Meyer, he said, "Don't you ever do that to me again." Urban Meyer was like, "I'll do whatever I want." Well, he's gone now, and the players are just celebrating because he was just such an asshole. And he's not the first asshole to come from Ohio State, but you know,
you're right.
First of all, the kicker should have hit him across the scalp with his helmet. That's the first thing. Like the warning would not have been enough for me. So, and Urban Meyer needs to stick to lap dances from women who are not his wife. Okay, let's not forget what he spent his bye week doing. So, you know,
exactly.
I'm not a fan. Can you tell?
Steve.
Me?
Yeah.
First thing, I just have to comment on both of the things. Adolf said 60 years, it was actually 55. The first black scholarship athlete in the Southeastern Conference is a very good friend of Adolf's and mine, and you guys probably know him too, Godfrey Dillard. Came from Visitation High School, and he and a guy named Perry Wallace from Washington, D.C. were the first two black scholarship athletes, same year as me, graduated high school in 1966. 56 years ago, there were no black players in the Southeastern Conference, and I agree with everything else Adolf said about it. Okay. As for Urban Meyer, I mean, all you got to do is recognize when he was the coach at Florida, he had 23 guys charged with felonies. He suspended none of them, including Aaron Hernandez, who was a murderer.
Yeah.
Okay, my schmuck of the week. It was so funny, Nance, that you mentioned the Constitutional Sheriff's Peace Officers Association, because my schmuck of the week is a guy by the name of Richard Mack, who happens to be the president of that.
Yes.
He's the president of that organization. And where did he come from before? Another fine organization called the Oath Keepers, who we already know all about, right? So what Nancy said is exactly true. These guys, I had to write some of it down because it was so astounding. These guys believe that they have the right to enforce the law and be the ultimate arbiter of what the law is based on their version of the Constitution. And they believe that their opinion supersedes the governor of their state or even the president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a group, I mean, think about this. This is a group of elected sheriffs who have formed this kind of an organization in this country. So all the things we've been talking about before, we've all been kind of doomsayers, you know. Bill was talking about a lot of things and we all agree. Think about that notion that some sheriff, some podunk sheriff in Ogemaw County can think that he controls what the Constitution says, mind you, the Constitution, and he's been through 8th grade. Other than that, he has a great legal background. That's my guy. Richard Mack, whoever the hell you are, you're my schmuck of the week.
Richard Mack has not been a sheriff since the early 90s. I think 90 or 91. So it's been 30-some years since he's actually been a sheriff, but he still goes by Sheriff Mack. So that's what people call him.
Of course.
Portia.
Well, I'm keeping mine local, but I'm going with somebody who, like Steve, talked about stuff he knows nothing about, and that would be our former police chief, James Craig, who this week decided to weigh in on charter schools and how they should be financed and how he should take money away from DPS students because their test scores are too low. And I have to give a shout out to Nikolai Beatty, who was like, we had hoped that he would stay away from topics that he didn't know shit about. But obviously that's not going to be his way of trying to run the governorship, which no one has broken it to him yet. He probably will not even get the nomination from the Republican Party. But I'm wondering and waiting to see what else he espouses on over the next few months that, again, he knows shit about.
But I do think I do think that I think I read in Cranes that he has gotten the endorsement of the owners of Better Made potato chips.
And they just announced yesterday that their
which I would
prices were
be,
going
I would
up.
be
So
thrilled.
you know what? I can refrain.
Handstand.
The valuable Better Made potato chip voting.
Right. All the cheese popcorn and potato chips you can eat.
I can do without my hot chips for the next year or so.
At his fundraisers, probably.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Bill.
I went national, and it's Mark Meadows and every Republican who did not vote to hold him in contempt of Congress.
That's a good one.
This is amazing to me, and there's a theme through all of these. All of these people seem incredibly anti-democratic to me, and that's why Mark wins this one. This notion that a former congressperson and chief of staff can say, I'm not showing up for my deposition before Congress because I'm going to assert a privilege. And I think that Portia and Steve would agree with me that in every case we've ever had in which somebody plans on asserting a privilege, you show up, you answer the non-privilege question, and then you assert the privilege. But no, apparently a congressperson, much like sheriffs, get to make the decision about what the law is all on their own. This is amazing to me, and the fact that these Republicans refused, that so many Republicans, all but two, I think it was, refused to hold him in contempt of Congress is disgusting. It's anti-democratic, and they all deserve to wear the thorny crown of Schmuck of the Week.
We should start having medals cast. And then Meadows would probably have about 12 by now, just hanging from a hook in his office. So, okay. All right. So that comes to me, and I am going with a gentleman named Matthew Walther, who apparently lives in, by his own description, rural Southwest Michigan. He's one of these traditionalist Catholics who homeschools his kid and doesn't practice birth control and blah, blah, blah. But he published an essay in The Atlantic, which should know better than to print shit like this, called Where I Live, No One Cares About COVID. and went on for probably over 1,000 words describing all the ways that nobody in his community of rural Southwest Michigan bothers to wear a mask. His kids are puzzled when they see people in masks. They don't understand them. They just are carrying on with their lives as though COVID does not exist. Meanwhile, I looked at a map and realized his closest major hospital is in Kalamazoo. In Kalamazoo, they are screaming for people to get vaccinated, wear masks, because they are at capacity like most other hospitals in Michigan. And for that, Matthew Walther, traditionalist Catholic dweeb, is my schmuck of the week. So that brings us to the end of our show. As always, I have to say copious and sincere thanks to our fantastic panel, who is always so lively. Starting from what would be, I guess, my left, Adolph Mongo in warm, sunny Phoenix, Steve Fishman downtown at the Ford Building, Portia Roberson, and Bill Cycli. And of course, the boss, Alan Lingle. And that does it for us. And we hope to see you next week. Lingle, take it away.
Drive home safely.